Sharp chat. Sharp chat. It seems we've stood and talked like this before. We looked at each other in the same way then, but I can't remember where or when.
So now, Jeff, going into 2009, you all go back to the medals, third place, Crossroads wins, and now you're in a really good position for 2010, except Old School scores substantially higher in the prelims than you guys. So, Jeff, I'd like to know, did you guys talk? This may seem silly, but I'm always interested in what motivates quartets. Was winning something you talked about as this is what we want to accomplish? Did you all talk about that explicitly going into the 2010 contest?
Yeah, actually back it up to January of 19. It was an 18-month plan that Syd had kind of project managed for us. And we went to our wives and said, we want to put everything we have into 2010. And we may not win, but this is going to take a ton of time. And then Laura Guyton and Patty LaRosa, who don't ever seem to get as much credit as they deserve because of the amount of time we asked Rick and Chad to be away from their families too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the goal was to do that if we could, throw everything we had at it, and then if it didn't work out, we would still continue to compete, but we wouldn't put the same amount of time and dollars and muscle into it. And so there was a concerted effort to try to, make everything that could happen. And that leads into also not just time away from families and the amount of, dollars and coordination and all that, but arrangements and ideas, so, that's not something that I can bring to the table, but Syd and Jim and Darin did this amazing concerted effort to come up with Anything Goes and Car Song and how to rework Lida Rose a little bit. And that takes so much time and effort that they have to put in both creatively and then crafting it out, Darin going into doing charts and all that. So everything pointed towards throwing the kitchen sink at 2010. Absolutely.
Now, Darin, for a quartet like you guys, talk about what advantages you all had to have you as the in-house arranger.
Well, I will tell you that, I look back, and Clay Hine and I have actually talked about this, because Fred had Clay that, he could just take whatever concept, especially those top two voices came up with, and then put it into, make it work for the quartet. And luckily I had that skill to be able to do that as we came up with these crazy ideas. Like, what if we sing the male part of Lida Rose, and then we do the female part of Lida Rose, and then we do both of them? I mean, is there a way to do that? And they turn and look at me. I'm like, oh my goodness. So, I think there's, especially for comedy quartets, because we have to come up with so many more ideas because some of them fail. And so I can't tell, we, out of those last 2 years, I bet we threw away as many songs as we kept. Yeah. And so the hard part for me was that I couldn't get frustrated in that process because I had to put so much work and time into it.
Of course.
I didn't love it. I wouldn't have, but it was, the payoff worked, I guess.
Yeah. Now, Jim, it's so tough when you do comedy, coming up with those new ideas. And you all have already mentioned that Rick LaRosa worked with you a lot. Talk a little bit about how much of his work was helping you come up with ideas versus helping you learn how to execute them effectively.
Yeah, it was funny to work with Rick for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons was that we were operating far differently than Fred had in their process. And so it depended upon what was going on. The one I remember specifically coming from Rick himself was he was walking through the airport on the way home from one of the trips with us, and suddenly this concept of where, when hit him in the airport and saying, you got to do this. But so much of the time we had concepts that we came up with ourselves, which really was a group effort. Many of the origination of concepts came from Syd, that he's such a...
Wait a minute.
I know.
Syd?
Now listen, now to be fair.
This is like a news flash here on Shop Chat, ladies and gentlemen.
Now to be fair, none of them were funny. The concepts were not funny in any way, shape, or form, but he had a lot of ideas. So we would, no, I'm kidding. But the ideas would come together. And so working with Rick, it took him a little while to get used to the way that we were operating, which was a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Kind of blew his mind that we would get in and we would stop things as much as he would and say, wait a second, try this instead. And once he realized that the chaos was actually kind of our normal state of creativity, he began to buy into that. But, you know, it's sort of necessity being the mother of invention. It was fun to watch the concepts develop, because that first half of 2008 was just drinking through a fire hose, especially for Jeff. I think we were together 12 times in the first half of the year, and that included prelims and then going into international. So we get through international and say, okay, now we've got a year to prepare.
Right.
We went into the end of the year with 6 songs ready to go. We're way ahead of the curve, farther ahead than we've ever been. And in the first part of 2009, a couple of them weren't really working, so we had 4 songs going into prelims. And we go into prelims, and 2 of the songs didn't really work, so we came out of prelims with 2 songs. So suddenly we go from 6 songs, we got 9 months, to 2 songs, and it's now May.
Right.
And so we were sitting in Des Moines, Iowa, at their first youth camp that they had there. And of course, in that spring, every available moment we weren't singing or practicing something else, we're saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Darin and Jeff were out of the room, and Syd and I were sitting there, and Syd is the one who said, you know what we should do? We should do Lida Rose. And I looked at him like he was insane. What are you saying? No. What if we did it like straight all the way through the one time, and then the second time, then we actually do the women's part, but we do it in the women's key, and then somehow in the third verse, then we cram them together somehow. And I said, okay, I can see where you're going. Now, just for a reference, there's no possible way we can do the second verse in the women's key, because we will die. But let's set that to the side for a second. And so the genesis of that was about 5 minutes of brainstorming. And the other 2 guys came in the room, were rolling around on the floor like, we've got to do this. And then as Darin said, then we go, Darin, take it away. So Darin says, okay, and gets permission to take the double quartet chart and then tear it apart and put it all back together and all of that stuff. So, but that one, we got the chart late May.
Wow.
Our first time together was the last weekend of May, where we sang through it one time, sort of, because it's such a mess. 2 weeks later, we were together in Traverse City, Michigan, and we had some time together there to run through it several times. And 2 weeks later was the Friday before International, and that was where we put in all the shtick, which is where Rick suggested the whole, let's do the music stand thing to get down the octave. We had the music explosion, which we'd come up with before because we wanted a vehicle to do that.
And you so guys did that with a show song, right? The 12 Days of Christmas. Correct. And it was the perfect way to blend the whole thing in together. And
we've been talking about it for years. We said, we've got to have the music gag, the sheet music gag in some contest number sometime. And so here it was. So the first performance of that was that Friday night in front of an audience, and the next public performance of it was on contest stage the next week.
How bright and sweet the memory one knows that I am hope, how long ago. Forever here's my love, oh song, forever fancy or fine. Will I ever tell Lida Rose, no, won't you mind? No Lida Rose, no Lida Rose, no Lida Rose.
So that was, you know, that getting to that point of just truly throwing caution to the wind. You're like, yes, this is going to be great. Do it. You know,
Right.
that's kind of a weird level to get to, where you're realizing, man, I used to be completely panicked about everything. Now just throw all caution to the wind, just go.
Right. Now I hope I don't seem distracted. I'm still just stuck on the whole Syd coming up with all the ideas.
Well, so are we.
Revelation here of all this. So Syd, I want to go to that 2010 contest now. So first 2 rounds, you guys sit in second place, although you won the middle round. This became a trend, I think, for you guys, as often happens with comedy groups, where you're like the horse that gets stronger as the race goes longer. And you guys get to finals. I went back and looked at the scores. Talk about like going out on top in a blaze of glory. The first song in your final round, you all scored the highest singing score for a song that the quartet ever scored. You scored an 89, and Jim already mentioned scoring an 87 was like the goal. Just over the course of the development of the quartet, what were some of the key factors for your all singing to reach that level?
Over the life of the quartet, a lot of prayer. No,
Fasting.
you know, I don't. There's probably a mixed bag of reasons. The phenomenon that you mentioned about this ramp up of scoring, I think there is some correlation of that specific to comedy. It was very aggressive for us. I mean, if you look at from prelims to international, for example, every year there was a very aggressive change in that. Same thing is true, I'm pretty sure, every international, quarters to semis to finals, it always had that big ramp. And I think in some respects, it's because the audience, and I include the judges in that when I say the audience kind of warms up to you, even if they've known you for 8 years, like it's like they warm up to you as the week progresses from song to song, and it becomes funnier simply because they're relating to you in a real-time way. Like, I just saw you yesterday and I laughed, so you're automatically funny today. And I think so that warming up, and clearly that also builds confidence and an aura around the comedy that you're delivering. So it feeds off of itself, I guess, is the way to say that. But your question was specific to singing and how we did that. I don't know. There's no truth to the idea that we put our best singing at the end. In fact, if anything, we put our what we thought was our best singing at the beginning of each of our contest cycles. And that's true too. If you look at a song like Where or When, or maybe a better example is Lida Rose, that it was very intentional that the first part of that song is our opportunity to demonstrate a very solid baseline of singing scores, because clearly it's just way more difficult and probably impossible to sing at the same level when you're throwing music stands around and jumping up.
Right. And that's the trade-off any comedy quartet makes. When you're putting your formula together, is you recognize you may have to trade a little bit out of singing, but if you get far more back in music and presentation, then a rising tide can sort of lift all the boats then. Yeah,
for sure. So I think all of those things are definitely a part of it. And then I'd ask the other guys to maybe chime in too. But the last thing I would say is, I think one of the really great things, we got little snippets from so many coaches along the way that Jim said, but one of the best things in my perspective that Chad Guyton really delivered to us was he wasn't trying to coach us to be something or someone that we weren't. And I'm not just talking about the comedic theme, but vocally, like, what do you have vocally? And let's exploit the things that are fantastic, and let's hide the things that are garbage. Like, just be you and be your voice, and don't work to be something that you're not. It's a lot less work, and it's a lot easier, and it's going to sound a heck of a lot better. And I think Chad, if there's one thing that he never let us stop doing, was bringing us back to, that's not you. Stop doing it. It doesn't even sound like you. Why are you doing that?
that's especially important because if I remember from our conversations over the years, say on bass, you're singing your natural part, but Darin, I think you're more of a bass than baritone naturally. Jeff, you're more of a bass than a tenor naturally. And Jim, you're more of a tenor than a lead naturally. So you are all having to work to just maximize what you have rather than trying to manufacture what you're not. Now, Jeff, I want to ask you about Jukebox Saturday Night.
Mopping up soda pop rickies to our heart's delight, dancing to swingaroo quickies, Jukebox Saturday Night, yeah. Goodman and Dorsey and Miller help to make things make, mixing hot mix with vanilla, Jukebox Saturday night.
What was the origin of that concept?
Oh my gosh. You know, I honestly, I don't know if I remember that the origin. I can tell you where the bits all came from. Most of them came from riding to Jackson, North Carolina in a daycare van, getting pulled over by Officer Christmas doing 90 miles an hour.
I can chime in on that. I remember.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And this is something Jeff touched on when we kind of had a little bit of a plan for 2009.
Yeah.
God, has it been 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
A part of that was we had to schedule in time to a date when, okay, we're going to bring all the ideas we can to the table at this time, because whatever ideas make it through the funnel have to then go through the cycle of giving Darin an opportunity to go arrange them. And so backing the calendar up to say, if we don't have ideas by this date, we're not even giving ourselves a chance to have it arranged and learn it and coach it. And so I don't remember the exact time frame, but that car song was an idea that I think Darin brought to that meeting, saying, well, here's an idea that I had, and if we did this and we were in a car, and so it kind of describes the whole thing. And I know I speak for myself, maybe for Jim and Jeff too, that I looked at him like, dude, I don't even know how, I don't know how you would possibly pull that off. Like, it's an idea, and we all agreed we'd come with ideas. So I thumbs up for that, but I don't know how I don't know how this would even work. I think we left that moment, we left it with no further discussion other than Darin saying, just let me take a stab at it and I'll come back with some music that will help paint the picture. Jim or Jeff, feel free to chime in, but I think that the idea happened around maybe August of 2009. And sometime over the next 3-month period, Darin came back and said, okay, let me walk you through how I see this.
Well,
yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was Darin's concept, and Darin can clarify. If I recall, he'd seen, I mean, this concept has been done different ways, and he had seen an orchestra do it, like a symphonic kind of a thing where they're switching from song to song kind of a deal or something like that, and he can clarify. But I remember, that I was right with him. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And Syd's like, well, and so we just had to let Syd go home and put it into a spreadsheet and map it all out and, do all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that once he bought in, again, I know it's not funny, but it really was Syd's suggestion. Once we all understood the concept, Syd was the one who said, oh, it's got to be Jukebox Saturday Night in terms of the album. And we realized, of course it does, that for barbershoppers of the era, it's such an iconic album that here are all these songs that people are going to know and they'll understand. You're on the trip, you're in the car with the quartet, I don't want to listen to that one, we go to that one, you go to that one, we got to get a, and boy, was that the dumbest idea we ever had. Darin,
Darin,
I'll shift the blame to you.
Darin, I have to ask, knowing a little bit about how comedy works, did you all get a chance to ever perform this full run through all the gags before a live audience before you got to the finals of the 2010 contest?
Yeah, I think we were able to put on a couple afterglows. Jim knows all he has the steel trap mind of remembering every little detail like that. But yeah, I don't think that going back to Jim's comment, I think I just said this would be kind of fun to do, quartet riding in the car, and there's an argument over who's,
Right.
what we're listening to and that type of thing, and let's build it around one of the most iconic, albums of all time. But it seems to me like we at least got a chance to do it a couple aftergoes. Is that true, Jim?
Yeah, we had done it, but
That's
you
good.
know, when we had done the Lida Rose the year before, that was the hardest thing I ever had to learn, because Lida Rose, the challenge is you do it straight and then you
Right.
screw it up, as opposed to a full-on parody. So you've got to still remember how to do it right and then wrong. So that was super hard to learn until we did the car thing. And one of the challenges with it was all about timing. So it changed so many times. How many times do we go back to saying Minnie the Moocher? No, that's too many. Okay,
Right.
that's okay now.
Right.
And then where do we jump? And I remember this specifically too, that Darin had arranged it originally to make the shifts from the songs to be relative key changes. So it was much easier to go from one song to the other.
Right.
And as we sang through it, and I remember bringing it up with the guys and saying, I'm concerned these are not the original keys in the album. And I know
Right.
it just from the pitch memory. And so we kind of left it, and we came back to it again to say, you know what, the audience is going to know. They're going to know in their gut, this isn't the right key. So Darin went back and rearranged it all and put them all into the keys that they're in on the original album, which of course was murder, because
From
some of
one
those
to the
jumps,
other.
they made no sense.
And then to add insult to injury, one of the songs didn't clear in our second to
Exactly.
last version.
Oh
Yes.
no.
And that was-
we sent the whole thing through and had to take that song out and then resend the whole thing again. Paid for it
Yes.
twice.
And that was a month before the contest, something like that. So,
Right.
so in its final configuration, again, I don't think that we did it in its final configuration until the contest stage, if I'm remembering.
And
Right.
if I'm remembering right too, that I definitely remember the one that didn't clear, but wasn't the first version also like twice as long? I know people are going to find that hard to believe, but I think the first version was twice as long, in that the songs that we used were long, the clips were longer, we had more songs in there. If I'm remembering correctly, we trimmed it back, and so, and this comes back to the thing I think Jeff said earlier about relearning and him rewriting his hard drive every time. That's
Right.
got to be the hardest thing we ever did, because you're building your key, your relative key of where one song is going
Right.
off. And then when you pull a song out and you replace it, all of that is now garbage. Like
Right.
It was fun to watch Jeff's brain that year. I mean, it was a struggle for all of us, but it's like, finally I got it. And then the next time, like, no, one more time back to this. Watch his.
I remember
I
I
gotta
read
step outside.
I read a quote one time from General Eisenhower. It was something along the lines of, you don't make a plan because everything is going to go as you expected, but because nothing will. And that was always my salve, because I'm like Jeff, I have to do tons and tons of reps. And I would just always, console myself with, well, at least there's a framework here. Now, that
Yeah.
song, I went back and looked at the score. Out of 500 possible presentation points, you scored 492. And I just want to say, on behalf of all barbershoppers, we are so bitterly disappointed you left those 8 points on the stage. I cannot
Wow.
believe that. How embarrassing. No,
Name
that is-
names.
You wanted to give
That
somebody
is-
else a shot,
that is just so phenomenal. And I just, having tried to do some of this stuff, just the sheer musicianship to pull that piece off on top of everything else is something that is just a marvel to behold. So, Jeff, what was it like waiting backstage? The call off takes place. Old School is announced second. What was going through your mind at that point?
One quick story about car song. You asked about doing it on a show. The one I remember is doing it in Nebraska at an Afterglow. That was on the stage. Jim, you got to help me with this, because you guys told the story about when you were singing with Dave. We stayed in that hotel and the pool, and you guys threw a football and busted the light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where was that?
McCook, Nebraska.
Cook, Nebraska. We did it so the Afterglow was on the stage, and we did it. We came up with this idea where Syd and I would jump out of the car while the car was moving.
I stomp on the brakes.
Yeah, right. And so Syd and I throw the doors open, and the only way to do that is we fell out of the car and then just started rolling backwards towards the curtain to create the illusion,
which is the wrong way.
Right.
To crickets.
It was great.
And the other one was the first time we did it for Rick LaRosa. There was two things that never got into it. One at the end was Jim arguing with the GPS,
right,
which ended up being the Siri thing we did in Philadelphia, just revised.
Oh, okay.
That never made it in. And the other one was where I had to go to the bathroom, so Jim pulls the car over, and I get out of the car and I go around the quartet and go squat down behind the podium. And then they throw me a roll of toilet paper. And Rick LaRosa said, you know, I'm known for taking chances. and even that's too far for me.
I got
so there was a couple of things that came out. So being backstage, I had I guess I had a sense of, if I don't know what else we could possibly do to win than what we had done, especially that final set was just out of hand, and the audience was with us. It felt like they were with us.
Yes.
But I've heard other quartets not win that the audience was with them. Boston Common, 9 of the 10 years that they didn't win. So we were backstage, and I remember in a very classy move, Joe Conley had felt like we had won and that they had not won. As competitive as Joe is, and as much as we wanted to beat them into the ground, Joe is a classy winner and a classy guy when he doesn't win. And he came over and put his arms around us and congratulated us on our win before they had called off Old Schools.
Wow.
And then Brandon came over and said, try to make the next 2 or 3 minutes go very, very slowly. And he had a sense that it was going to happen as well. But I had been snake bit so many times standing backstage with Riptide thinking this was going to be it, and it didn't happen, that I could not believe it until it actually happened. And we were all kind of huddled up, and when they called off Old School as second, because they went to Silvertown, come on, it had to be done. You gotta say it! That's a story. That's another story from their time. So I remembered thinking how cool it was when Gotcha won, and Jim Klein being the guy who had been through the battle longer than they did. And the three of them went out on stage, and then Jim came last. They waited, and that just was so powerful. And I thought, I'm going to go out last. I'm going to let, the three of them will go. I need to take a couple of breaths and just sort of gather myself. And I just thought that would be really emotional for my family, who had watched me go through this previously and not in just everything. And so then Steve Jameson, who was doing the call off, said, Stormfront. And when he got to the ST of Stormfront, I broke the huddle and was the first guy on stage. And a cool, neat little side thing there. If people go back and watch that video, Chuck Harner, God rest his soul, was a CA, and my dad was a CA at the time. And Chuck asked and brought my mom and dad into the pit and the finals set. And so there's a really neat picture when those three are jumping up and down. My mom and dad ran up to the edge of the stage and were going like this.
Oh, that's great.
And I kneeled down and I hugged them. So there's a really cool photo of me hugging my mom and dad, who are in the pit at the edge of the stage, while the three of them are jumping up and down.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I have just a couple of more questions for you guys today. Thank you so much for all of your time. I want to ask each of you to talk about what have been some unexpected joys or experiences of doing comedy. And Syd, I'll start with you.
Unexpected joy of doing comedy. I think one of the things that makes us who we are is that we're genuinely warm people that like and want to be approachable. And I think one of the things about comedy is when done well, it makes you approachable. People loved laughter is contagious, and it's one of the best adrenaline shots in the world. And so I think the adrenaline that we get from other people laughing and them feeling totally empowered and totally comfortable to come up afterwards and hit you on the shoulder and keep the laughter going is it's contagious. That adrenaline of laughing with other people is one of the greatest feelings in the world. Laughing with each other is obviously super cool and a bond I'll never forget. Like, that's just so cool. But being able to experience that with strangers who you don't know and come from all different sides of the planet that feel comfortable in sharing that laughter, that's a tough one to replace for me.
That's great. Darin, how about for you?
I think the biggest thing is giving the gift of laughter when people need it the most. Whether that's, we can't tell you how many times people have come up and we don't know them at all after shows, and they'll say, my husband passed away 3 months ago. I haven't been out. This is the first time I've laughed, and I needed it so badly. Same thing when we did the show with the AIC last week. These last 3 months have been unprecedented. In our lifetimes, and what's going on, and I had so many of my friends just text me and say, "Thank you. I needed that. I needed to laugh. Thank you so much." So I think that's the highlight for me.
That's great. Jeff, how about for you?
Coaching with you with Lunch Break was a big one. Being able to impart some of the things and the trust that you guys had put in me. That was a big thing for me, because it was the first time that I had ever stepped out of Stormfront and been asked to help another comedy quartet. You guys coming ninth that year was super emotional. But God, there's so many, Shane. The biggest one for me, we went to England right before, right, Jim, in 2010 to do the Babs convention. And a lady came up to me, and she was from Holland, and she had come all the way over just because she wanted to talk to us and thank us. And she had a son that was autistic, and she was telling us that when the time in Holland, when it was competition in the US, would have been like 2-3 in the morning, and her son loved Stormfront, and there had been a transition period of him not being autistic, and then he just sort of disappeared. And when she played him our DVD, somehow that connected with him, and she said, when you guys compete, I wake him up at 2 in the morning so that he can actually see you live. And there's the part that kills me is, and the impact that this has, and this incredible gift of Stormfront that has been in my life and my family's life, the impact, and this, Shane, because people you don't even know, you may never meet. She told me that when we would be on stage at 2 in the morning and wherever in Holland, she said he's laughing and he's engaging, and the light comes on in his eyes, and then when we're done, the light goes off. And she said, so for a few minutes, because of you, I get to see my son.
Yeah, that's
I don't know if I've got a better one than that.
Yeah, that's great. And Jim, those are all such compelling experiences. What would you add to that?
There are so many fun things that are unexpected. And for me, that was that happened live on the contest stage, at shows. Syd alluded to that earlier. The number of things that you don't plan that just happen by accident, and the audience responds, and you say, "That's it. From now on, that's it." And and to be able to get to that point, I'll never forget watching Fred go through the process of winning, and watching Fred actually change stuff backstage to adapt to something that had happened that day or right before, and being completely just so in awe of that through the 90s, and saying, to be that comfortable on international contest stage, wouldn't that be great? And then not thinking about it for years. And I remember not thinking about it again until we're backstage at international doing that very thing. And you know, it was the year we won, right? Lunch break is out there, and so we hear, because people are texting us, it's great to be in the era of when people are saying, oh, watch out for this and this is happening. We're like, how can we put that in? Can we put that in? So we throw in the whole lunch break took 44 guys on stage for the sound check, and that was that realization, broke the mic, that realization that that's actually happening,
right? And
that comfort level of, I don't care how long we're on stage, I don't care about the score, I don't care about any of this stuff, because of that magic that, again, it's not exclusively comedy, but everybody loves to laugh. And to be able to take that and have an audience so with you that it really gets to that point where it doesn't matter what you do, to be fortunate enough to be at that point where the extra look, the double take, the whatever, all of those things coming together, just so many of those things across the years that are hilarious. We tell the stories to each other over and over again. You remember when this happened? You remember when that happened? You remember when that happened? And but echoing what the other guys are talking about here, and the number of these, and this is, I'll just tell you, this one is brand new from this last week. You know, the social media has been alive with all kinds of things. And after the show on Friday night, got a Facebook comment from someone who was saying that her daughter had purchased our CD at Summer Harmony Camp a couple of years ago where we were, and her daughter had given it to the grandfather who was dying of brain cancer as an early Christmas present. And this woman was saying that her father was a barbershopper for a long time, and he loved the music and he loved the CD, and we were able to be something that he enjoyed right up till the end. And she said, thank you for bringing them even closer through your music and comedy. Yeah. And, you know, that's where you say, metal schmetal. I mean, who cares about the rest of this stuff? I mean, that's why it's so special. And all of those little things, you say, all of the hassle and the work and the time and the effort and the money and the trip and the time away, and was it all worth it? And then you say, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's just great. Well, guys, one last question. Syd, I'll just toss this one to you. What's on the horizon for Stormfront? What's up next for you guys?
Well, we're going to take the next 2 weeks off. And then
That's it.
No, you know, Shane, we have in the very short term until the world gets put back together a little bit, and audiences and people congregate the way that we all love and are so desperately anxious to get back to doing. You know, our show schedule, like most quartets and choruses, is obviously put on indefinite hold. But I think I speak for all when I say, you know, this quartet in large part was born out of a family framework, and I include Jeff in that very much so, even though he is introduced to the Stormfront family in 2007. His barbershop roots are it's the same story and the same family, and frankly, you know, Shane, similar story to all you and all the other barbershoppers, that this is a way of life for us. So you know, I fear the day when all of the other pressures of the world create an environment where all barbershoppers or people, but Stormfront, if there's a day that we can't do this, that's going to be a really sad day. And you know, Darin mentioned earlier, one of the joys is being able to provide laughter when people need it the most. That's true for us too.
Right.
Laughter the most. This is one of the anchors that brings us back to who we are and what we do and the fabric of our being and our families. And so I think, I think that, when you ask what's on the horizon for us, I would say we're just anxious to get back and do more shows and, do it in a way that continues to involve our families as much as possible. Because it's far from an event that involves just the four of us. It's
right.
Our extended families, parents, mothers, brothers, cousins, sisters, like all of them are a part of this story for us. So
that's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for giving your time today. And I want to thank you guys for all of the laughs, all of the service that each of you have given to Barbershop and for Barbershop and for audiences around the world. Thank you for sharing your gifts with us. Thanks for being with us today, guys.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this fantastic look at Stormfront Quartet on another exciting edition of Shop Chat.
Shop Chat! Shop Chat!